Hello, I'm Stuart Preston, and this is the Stoned Ape Reports, where I have conversations with those who have changed their lives with the help of psychedelics. In this episode, I had the honor of speaking with Beth. Beth had big goals and big questions as a little girl. Later in life, though, she lost her father, and then some other changes came about that had her questioning, what is life all about? She shares her experiences with ayahuasca and the South American dieta and more. It all helped her find purpose in life and in business, and now she helps others do that as well. So let's hear from Beth. Beth, thank you so much for joining me here on the Stoned Ape Reports. It's an honor to talk to you. I'm glad that we made the connection and could make this happen.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me here, Stuart. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into your story. So, as you know, here on the podcast, we like to talk about, what was going on in life, good, bad, and different that kind of led you on this road to psychedelics, and what your experiences were like, and then what was like afterwards. So tell us a little bit about, what was going on in your life.
Well, so right now I'm in my early-ish 40s and I grew up in the Bay Area in California, and I was kind of it's kind of a long story, but at the age of 14, I was given a hit of acid. And that's kind of what started the whole thing. I had grown up in a very open kind of environment, like open, not with my family, but open everywhere else in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And, had started working with cannabis around, God, probably, 13 or so. And then I had been going to these like youth dance clubs at a pretty early age, around, 12, 13, 14. And someone actually gave me this hit of acid, and I knew what it was. I had heard about it, but I didn't really know what was going to happen. And I remember he was older, and he's like, well, take it now. And I actually had a curfew because I was only 14, and I ended up going home. I had to go home, about 30 minutes after I took it.
Wow.
So long story short, my very first experience was alone in my bedroom with my parents down the hall, and me just being like, what the hell is happening? But really intrigued by the whole experience. Of course, at some points a little scared, at some points a little like, whoa, this is crazy. But I had always, from a very young age, I had always been very inquisitive and pretty deep. One of those people who's always kind of questioned, like, what are we all here for? I remember the very first moment where I had this thought about death, like, oh, wow, what happens when we die? And that was at a pretty young age. I would say maybe around like 7, 8, 9. I started wondering about these deep life thoughts.
Wow.
So doing this powerful experience at the age of 14, and then of course from there, it eventually led to other experiences, psilocybin, and this is back in the early 90s. I was going to clubs and raves, and then that led to, ecstasy, MDMA. Let's be honest, it wasn't really just MDMA back then. Ketamine, all the things. And so that's how it all started. It was really from this place of being young, and really, I would attribute a lot of it to this, back when I went to raves and dancing, I remember really noticing this ultimate feeling of everything is okay. Like, especially being, a teenager or in college and everything seems to be in chaos. But when I was dancing and on something like ecstasy, everything just seemed at peace and perfect, right? And so it was kind of, I'm a very aware that it was a bit of escapism. At that age, it was like, okay, let's just go have fun. But I remember it being a very deep experience, like being with hundreds or thousands of people, being in some of these kind of weird places that some of these underground raves were happening and held, and just feeling this inner connection. Like, people were just so friendly. I remember making friends like on a New York City subway, random people there was just this connection, and it wasn't really it really wasn't the drugs. I wasn't on drugs all the time. I actually didn't do that many drugs in the grand scheme of things. But it was something about the letting go of the mind
Hmm.
and really just coming into the body and being able to move and being able to be free. So that was really what got me curious about like what else is possible. I studied psychology psychology and art history in
Hmm.
college, and neuroscience it was really some of my favorite subjects. As I got older, and this path pretty much continued for a while until I would say 9/11. There was kind of a halt in my life because I actually
Hmm.
lived in New York City at the time of the 9/11
Hmm.
experience.
Yeah.
But I was always curious about what was really going on here and what the potential was. And I had it's interesting, my dad was an engineer who worked with energy for a living. And I think even though he was kind of your typical like conservative engineer, like kind of shut down, my mom was a hippie in the Haight-Ashbury.
Hmm.
Of course, by the time I'm in my 20s, she's turning like conservative and, like wasn't
Yeah.
as open as she used to be. But it was just interesting because, I had started exploring like the potential of the human mind, and then had dated this guy, my ex-boyfriend in my 20s, who got me actually into theoretical physics. And that's when all the dots really started connecting between all these questions I had growing up, up with pretty much a physicist in my house, expanding my mind like very much and very fast at a pretty young age, like 14 up until, I took a break actually probably, in I would say like my late 20s to early 30s, maybe like a 5-year break. And
Hmm.
everything really started coming together. I started questioning a lot of life. Like actually my dad suddenly died when I was, kind of prematurely in my late
Yeah.
20s. And all these experiences and then my lifestyle and my career, it just really made me start to question like what is this all about? Like what are we here for? We're just here to, be part of the rat race and make money and then die. That just doesn't seem right. It didn't make sense. So fast forward, until my 30s, that's when, I was introduced to, I mean, I had already known about Burning Man since I was pretty young because I grew
Hmm.
up in the Bay Area, but I was very resistant to like, oh, that's just a bunch of hippies on drugs. I don't want
Yeah.
to go there. But, I started exploring this idea of working with these psychedelics in a different way. And my first ceremonial journey of ayahuasca, and then then it turned into ceremonial psilocybin as well. It also coincided with a lot of deep growth I was going through in my own life after my dad had died, and
Yeah.
really questioning what I was doing and questioning myself and my upbringing, and also becoming so self-aware that I started to see what wasn't working for the way I was living. Like my anxiety I've had since I can remember, since day one. My fast-paced lifestyle, my drive, like my way of being. And then I was also running. So here's another one that's a really interesting one. I was also very into endurance running. So I took
Hmm.
up marathons and ultra marathons and really got deep into that culture, as I would call it, because it really is this whole lifestyle.
Hmm.
I started taking up trail running. And the one thing I noticed when you run trails is you also lose your mind. Like you have to actually, you have to let go of the mind in order to not trip and fall and hurt yourself. So all of this was happening over just a few year period, like career change, father dying, lifestyle,
Yeah.
questioning everything, expanding the mind, going to Burning Man, getting really deep into this endurance running and experiencing the human potential of the body to also overcome things like pain after running for 7 hours straight. Like I
Hmm.
started wondering, like, well, because I would notice that I would be able to completely transcend pain with my mind. I
Hmm.
actually, I eventually was published in articles. I actually launched a running apparel business, and I started talking about all this interconnection between, mindfulness and meditation and endurance sports. And then there's, bring in spirituality and psychedelics and quantum physics. And all of a sudden, just in this one period of a few years of my life, every dot started connecting. And that's when I was like, wow, this all makes sense. Everything's just pure energy. And we have this potential in us to expand beyond what we even can comprehend as humans with our limited experience of the mind.
Hmm.
And, of course, the benefit of all of this, because by now I had already taken up meditation, daily practice, kind of gone on to the Buddhist spiritual path. But it all started, it was essentially, I was realizing that everybody's saying the same thing, and that all these different pathways are all the same. They're just different paths to the same experience, which essentially is letting go of that damn monkey mind that gets in the way of everything, including, as I got really deep into, the healing benefits of ayahuasca and psilocybin and, the regular work with plant medicine and going down to Peru and doing dietas and getting really deep into it. That's when I saw the deeper side of healing generational trauma, like literally changing our DNA, healing the body of all this trauma that's actually stored in all our cells. Because I'm of the belief that pretty much every human on this planet has some sort of a trauma. I used to think I was one of those people that, oh, my life was kind of okay. I had the typical like parents who got divorced and some, trauma in the household, and, there's sexual abuse in my family. But I always thought that was normal because I grew up with most of my peers having, alcoholism. I mean, I could go on and on. It's like, yeah, like my whole family was pretty much alcoholics. Everybody suffered from anxiety and other disorders and unhealed trauma. And, after getting really deep into this path, and then also working with, the integration, of course, like there's so much outside work I do as well, like somatic therapy and the mindfulness and the daily practice. I just started to see like, wow, they're not it, but they are the missing link. Like I remember talking to my Buddhist teacher about going and doing ayahuasca for the first time. And he's actually, he was like a former heroin addict turned meditation teacher, Josh Corda. He's actually really well known. He runs this group called Dharma Punks in New York City. And he's amazing, but very against like turning to drugs. And but I was like, well, wait a second. But if this is able to lead me to that same state that meditating daily for 7 hours a day would do, like, what's the problem? And
What was the problem?
yeah, exactly. I mean, I am not one of these people that thinks psychedelics is for everybody. But essentially, I was like, well, but wait, it's helping me. So that's where, it's been about, I don't know, 8-9 years of my life is where I went deeper into the path of what I would call just medicine. Like, I only work with things in, healing settings, ceremonial settings. Yeah, sometimes I'll do microdosing. And of course, I don't know, if I go to Burning Man ever again, maybe I'll take a little there and have some fun. But essentially, it's now more part of my my healing and personal development path.
When you say ceremonial, do you mean also even if that's alone, or is it always in like an official ceremony with somebody leading the ceremony?
Yeah, I guess ceremonial is probably the wrong word. It's more intentional use, right?
Intentional. Okay,
I
yeah.
mean, sometimes I'll go on a hike and take a little and, set an intention, and yeah, alone, together, it really doesn't make a difference. But more having intention behind it versus 20 years ago or 15 years ago when I was just more using it as escapism, or using it as, transcending all the stuff in life that I just couldn't deal with, and even something like endurance running, it took me a few years to realize that, wait, endurance running is actually escapism as well. I mean, it's just a little more, quote, accepted by society that you can go run a marathon every month. But after a while, I started to notice, I was like, wait a second, this is almost the same as just using drugs for the wrong reason. It's like, I mean, we
Yeah.
could kind of weigh like, eating sugar or drinking daily dose of coffee or whatever it is, and I'm not to judge, I'm not even judging myself, but it was more about what I started to witness within my own being of, okay,
Mm.
what is serving me on my path versus actually, like not helping me at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of the overview gist. I mean, there's so many fine details, but it was all this short period of, I would say, over 3 or 4 years where it just everything started making sense on a different level. And I would also say that was probably, like my quickest, largest spiritual awakening I've had, like just during all of this. Um,
Were there any? So I like that, the spiritual awakening, and I like your comparison. I have compared. So I have a um, counselor, or whatever you call it, a therapist right now, a live human being therapist.
yeah.
And I sent her to my Stone Dave show. I said, "Hey, watch this. It's neat." And she watched it. It's not neat. Shouldn't be flippant. If you end up watching, anybody listening here, it's a tear jerker, and it's big and important. So I don't want to make it.
Mm,
I don't want to surprise
exactly.
you. But I sent her to it. I said, "Go look at this." And in the show, I say that in my past, probably 20 years ago, I went through intense psychotherapy.
Mm,
And I said, one ayahuasca ceremony can be as effective as 1 or 2 years of psychotherapy. And I believe in it because I'm still
yeah.
doing it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and
Totally.
she came back to me and she's like, "So why are you doing this then? If you think, one ayahuasca ceremony is worth 1 or 2 years, of therapy." And I was like, "Because this has its place too.
Yeah.
There's always something there to learn to grow from." And so that's what I love about what you said about how it helped. I can meditate for 7 hours, which is not a bad thing, and you may still
Yeah.
do that, right?
Yeah.
But and you can run for 6 hours,
Exactly.
and or go on a journey, an intentional journey, and all of those can get something out of it. So I like how you
Yeah.
kind of put that out there. But
Yeah.
were there any specific? Do you want to share? As we talked about before we started, recording, we don't necessarily want to go through the trip reports that everybody loves,
Mm.
but do you have any specific experiences from ayahuasca, mushrooms, anything out there that you kind of want to share and say, when I did it this one time, here's what I took from it?
Oh my God, there's so many. Yeah, so I think I have a theory as to what happened to me and why I kind of made this my life.
Hmm.
Because now it's a big part of my business. I help a lot of people on the medicine path, as I would call it. The first time I went to drink ayahuasca, I thought it was one of those things I would do once and never do again.
Mm,
I'd already seen the benefits of psilocybin and didn't really think I needed to have some kind of bigger experience. Or I guess I didn't really even know what it was going to happen. I was just kind of curious and the timing was right. And my first experience really blew me away to the point where it took me probably a year and a half to integrate that first experience.
wow.
Yeah, I just didn't know the potential of what it had in it. And there's multiple moments from that first night where, I still to this day, I wonder that because I had assumed that everybody had the exact experience as me. I didn't really know how it worked, and now I know it's just so different than anything else there is. I assumed everybody in the room was exactly same vision, same
Yeah.
feeling, same everything, and it was not true. I work with the person I work with is primarily is based down in Peru and is really a high level human being, like a super, like I wouldn't rarely say this, but he's like the real deal shaman.
Right.
He's been practicing for 30 years. He has really high integrity. He also makes extremely strong medicine, which I didn't know the first time I drank it
Hmm.
because I had nothing to compare it to. So I kind of went in with this ultimate, I'm never doing this again. I want to know, like I actually went in with this intention of I wanted to be shown these concepts of life and reality that, the Buddha talks about, but the ones that the human mind have a really hard time grasping.
Yeah.
And I was just curious also. I was like, well, I'm never going to do this again. So I might as well just surrender and see what happens. And that first experience, even this is hard to put into words, but at one point it literally showed me visions of the nature of the illusion of reality, which
Hmm.
is, it's even then, it's like, how do you even comprehend that? Because I still can't. I've seen it now and I get it now. And of course, all the great masters have been talking about this and all the big, the spiritual texts. I mean, this is ancient quote knowledge, but how do you grasp that? It's impossible because everything seems so real when, I don't know, when you and your partner are getting in a fight or whatever, like something happens in
Yeah.
your business, like, we get caught up in our daily dramas. So when I was shown that, I remember just being really like, I think I was taken to this void state of the ultimate everything and nothing at the same time. It was really hard to grasp. And it was also extremely beautiful. And
Hmm.
it showed me a lot of, again, this is hard words to use, but it kept showing me these like future visions, like very future oriented of not just me and my dramas, but the state of the world and the way it's going and where it's headed and what things could look like one day. And I still actually have a lot of faith in humanity and this earth, even with the craziness of this year and the coming years probably. But but seeing all this and actually being able to have a visual, like I tend to be a visual learner,
Hmm.
it just it hit something in me where I was like, wow, this is different. This is not like go take some mushrooms and lay around, listen to music or go hiking. This is like healing. I very much, like you said, I had an experience during that very first journey where it felt like it was about 3 seconds long, and it probably was, but it showed me something about my family that instantly healed, like a
Mm.
huge aspect of all this weight I was carrying around, like, anger and upset and misunderstanding and understanding. And it just showed me one thing. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. And all of a sudden, it was like my heart completely changed. And it's never been the same. Like it was a permanent. And I remember feeling when it happened, like I was like, wow, that probably would have taken me like 2 or 3 years in therapy, or
Hmm.
even, or possibly even never. I do think, and I'm very much like you, like I pretty much work with a therapist or similar all the time, like pretty much most of my life. And I
Hmm.
really believe in, like, my partner's even a somatic therapist.
Mm.
So I've always been very good with this integration stuff. Like, okay, let me talk to someone and sort this all out. So for me, I saw the deep level potential of like, wow, okay, that probably would have taken me a few years, but now that I've had this visual and a very experiential feeling, I can grasp the concept a lot quicker. And then things like forgiveness comes in and understanding and compassion. And I believe these are the keys to healing a lot of inner trauma. Of course, then there's like real, like I'm still doing the outside work. Like I do somatic therapy. I've done a lot of, deep level trauma healing. And then there's the physical aspect of what the medicine is even doing. And I do believe that the medicine actually is here to help clear traumas, restructure DNA. I've had all the experiences of I mean, I literally healed a pain in this has happened multiple times where I've healed physical pains in my body that I knew had to be more than just physical pain. Like physical pain is connected usually to a lot of emotional pain, right? Like it's the
Hmm.
pain body. And I had this jaw issue for years where my jaw was like, it wasn't just TMJ, it was like beyond that. And I was like, what? Who do I even see and what are they going to do? Like crack my jaw and refix it? And I knew that it was something deeper than that. I knew it wasn't just physical. So I actually went and worked on this multiple times within, ayahuasca and psilocybin work, and it healed, and it kept showing me this deep level, like, ancestral trauma. Like, it wasn't just my mom or my mom's dad or whatever. It was showing me, like, I don't even know how to explain it, but, like, Vikings killing one another, and
Wow.
people in my family, and and I don't know who they are, and if they're even, I mean, who knows, right? It could be something else, but it just kept showing me this, and I did a forgiveness practice around it while it was happening, and it has never been back ever again. Like,
Wow.
literally. And not only that, but the interconnection between healing things like, certain pains in your body, it's all interconnected to other things. So when I healed my jaw, all of a sudden my entire business blew up. I became more outspoken than normal. I was able to share myself and my truth on a deeper level. I mean, it's all this physical and mental and consciousness and traumas and past and the healing. It's all interconnected to everything. It's not just like, oh, I'm pissed at my parents. It's like, this stuff
Yeah.
affects our love life, our health, our, wellness. I mean, and there's now scientific proof about this. It's more and more epigenetics are showing that this is all very real. So
Yeah,
that's
to hear
like
more
that's
about
like
that.
one experience.
So that one little experience that happened quickly in your first ceremony, which I'm very jealous, by the way. I mean, I think my first 5 ceremonies, I kept going back and like, I don't feel anything. Is this stuff even working?
Oh
No,
my God.
it's not true. I could, visuals and I could feel stuff and I purged, but I didn't take anything like big away. Little things that I could kind of dig around. So to hear
Mm.
that, I'm like, part of me is just like, wow, that's really awesome.
Well, there's always
Yeah.
more, right?
Yeah, there's always more, and it's just always peeling stuff off. So yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Peeling
Um,
the onion layers, totally.
exactly. Any other experiences, journeys you wanted to share before we wrap up with some other questions?
One of the other more significant ones that I actually share it with a lot of my clients was, so I am currently in my third business. And before that, I worked at early stage startups. And before that, I was in corporate. So, but I knew I was born to be an entrepreneur from the time I was a kid.
Hmm.
And my heart always wanted a business since I can remember, since probably like 7, 8, 9. I knew I was like, I'm here to have a business.
So you
Um,
wanted to know the meaning of life, and you wanted to be an entrepreneur at age 7.
I used to sell, me and my best friend used to play a game when we were little kids where we would like set up a store and sell things on our street in suburban California. And we had this game that we used to call City, where we were these like business women who would fly all over the world, and we lived in cities. And lo and behold, she lives in Rome. I lived in New York City up until 3 years ago. And we both kind of live that life. Like, I had
Wow.
the, yeah. So I don't know what it is, but I knew, even, as a teenager, when I got onto the whole path of, like, my parents wanted me to go to college and get a job and stay there my entire life until I die. I knew something was wrong with that. Like, I knew I wasn't meant for it. My brother was an entrepreneur 6 months after college because he was like, fuck this shit. I'm not doing this whole job thing, like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it does actually run in my family. I was just stuck in fear for a really long time. But what happened is, I've done 4 dietas down in Peru, with the guy I work with, and
4 GSs?
dieta, like the traditional plant dieta.
Oh, dieta. Okay. Yeah.
Dieta, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you go, spend almost, it's like 9 days and 5 ceremonies, and you diet these other plants, and it's amazing and deep and
Yeah.
pretty hardcore. It's very scary at some points, let me tell you, but amazing. And back in I think it was 2016, there was this, I had been running a business and kind of questioning everything and like not feeling it anymore, but I also was starting this business, but kind of like not sure, and I was kind of doing both and in this limbo stage. And but I was also very much like, surrendered to life at that point. Like I just kind of knew like things had to change and I needed to take a different approach, which was like, you know what, let me just get curious about everything. And
Mm-hmm.
the last day of this dieta, I had this visual during this experience that showed me this vision where it was basically living this life of just following the path of joy, like the path of inspiration and fun and what lights me up and like what do I really want to be doing. And it showed me this image of me like hanging out with a bunch of cool medicine people, like friends of mine and this community, and like running around in the field, and I was just helping them with their business because I was already doing that anyways. I had been helping people with their business back when I started my previous business and when I was also helping early stage startups. And I just enjoyed it. It was just fun. It came very naturally to me. I was kind of one of these natural entrepreneurs since I was young.
Hmm.
And when it showed me this image, something shifted in me where I was like, you know what would happen if I just did what I liked to do? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
of course, I didn't and I never recommend anyone, don't go quit your job tomorrow. Definitely don't quit your job the day after an ayahuasca ceremony. But, be practical, of course, but then also just get curious and just see what would happen if you follow that path. Like, go launch a podcast if that sounds like fun. Go start some whatever project. Like, just see what happens. And
Mm-hmm.
that moment, something shifted, and I started approaching my life completely different. Where, of course, I was practical and paying the bills and this and that, but I did just do what seemed like a yes. Like anything that came up that felt really good, yes. If it didn't feel good, no. And it has brought me to much more joy, happiness, and success than living in any other manner. And it's one of those things where I could tell this story 1,000 times, but until one experiences it, it's impossible, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that vision alone, and this is where I say to people who are on this path, look, like, if you're getting these kind of visions over and over and over that are showing you possibility and they're showing you a life of happiness and a life of, living in alignment with what you want, with what's in your heart, like maybe there's a reason why. This is why I went and created I've done now 2 series about this interconnection between psychedelics and purpose, because I do believe that when you're on this path, it wakes up this part of yourself that you just can't deny. Like, yes, maybe you can deny it for a few years or part of your life, but usually if you're in like an unhappiness or a place of total misalignment in your career or other areas of life, to me, it wakes up this part of you that just knows you need to change it. And that moment, I remember I was like, oh, okay, like that way of living is not working. Let me try this other way of living and approaching everything different. And voila, everything has completely changed ever since then. So that was a pretty significant, experience as well. One of many.
It helped you find your path. And I think what I was hearing is that you learned about finding one's path from this vision, from the change you made, how you've added purpose into what you do, and you've recommended people. It's like, hey, if you find the things that bring you joy, you're going to find joy and happiness and success. I think that led you to somewhere in your own professional life where you're doing these types of things to help other people find those pathways. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It tends to be, I believe, because I see this with most of my clients, that your journey becomes, what you're here to help others with. It's like you've been put through this
Mhm.
initiation of sorts for a reason, right? And now, when you feel the call to serve and help others, it's like usually tends to relate to your own initiation/journey of life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Um, so you mentioned being a runner, a long distance runner. I have done a little bit of running in my life, and it seems to come up at times where people, will take some medicine and go for a run. Have you ever tried
Oh
that?
my God. It's so funny. So I tried that once. So the first reason why I went to Burning Man, the first year I went in 2013, was to run the Burning Man ultra marathon. And during the run, it was 50 kilometers, so
Mm-hmm.
whatever, I forgot how many miles that actually is, 32. I was like, wow, let's take some mushrooms and do it on mushrooms. And I did not the first year, but the second year, I did actually a gigantic dose the day before the ultra marathon. That was interesting because I came in eighth place female, so I actually did very well.
Wow.
The third year I tried taking them during the run and I realized that it was a terrible idea. So I personally don't know how people do it. I actually have found that I like taking little bits when I do something leisurely like a hike,
Mm-hmm.
but when it's something like running for, 5 hours straight around a hot desert kind of thing, it actually made me worse. The pain just came out more. I could feel everything. I didn't love it. So I have heard of people, I've heard of people doing ketamine and trail running. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, maybe
So
the anesthetic part of that.
I know. I was like, I don't know. I can barely move. Like I can barely stand straight when I do that. No, I think the nicest thing is to do, smaller doses and maybe dance or move your body at the end of an ayahuasca ceremony, things like that are a little more
Yeah.
they just make more sense. But it is an interesting concept. I am fascinated by it.
Yeah,
I
I am
actually
too.
I tried to post on Reddit many years ago to ask how many people were doing psychedelics and, running at the same time. I didn't get that many responses, but
Huh.
maybe
Yeah,
maybe these
maybe I read
days.
your post. Yeah, because I saw some people on Reddit talking about that. They're
Oh
like,
my
yeah,
god.
it gives you more energy. And I was like, what? Like you mentioned, having a journey and then the next day running. I think I'm wrecked for a whole day.
I know.
I can't imagine going out for one of my little runs, much less doing an ultra marathon.
Exactly. No, that's I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm older now or something. I don't know. But I am fascinated by it. I would love to know if anybody's into that.
Yeah, we have to find somebody for that. So, when you say do a little bit and then go out for a hike, what is a little bit?
Well, so it's interesting. I've become very sensitive to all medicines ever since doing four dietas. People that I've been on these dietas with say that when you do these, you just become really attuned to the plants.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually have very powerful experiences with flower essences, which have zero psychoactive substances in them. So I'm super sensitive. So when I do a microdose, I literally dip my finger in some powdered psilocybin, and that's how I quote weigh my dose. I don't even
Interesting.
my dose is not even weighable because when people have given me a microdose that's actually weighed out, to me it's just too much.
Really? Well, that's how you find
Yeah.
out. You're supposed to bracket down, so that's you figured it out.
I believe that and I think people who tend to be on this path and are pretty deep into the plant spirit itself and really build a relationship, which is kind of, it's essentially what you do down in, when you go on a dieta, you work with not just ayahuasca, but these other plants and you build a relationship and you definitely communicate with plants on a different level. So I believe, when you get to this place of really being connected, you don't need that much. I recently had some ayahuasca medicine in Costa Rica on a retreat I was on. And, there was the second night I was like, oh, I just kind of want to lay around, listen to music. That's what I thought. Right. And I did a very small amount and it pounded me, like pounded me. And this has happened to me before. And I realized, when you're just already so connected to the plant, you don't need as much as you think, you know?
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. I have two of my best journeys with mushrooms have been about 1.5 grams.
Oh yeah, I love
And
it.
yeah, and I told a psychonautic comedian friend of mine that I said, I just had an amazing experience with 1.5 grams. And he was like, what? And then he went and tried it, and he was messaging me. He's like, "Man, that was incredible."
Yep.
So
I
it's
agree.
interesting. Yeah, once you're dialed in, it's almost kind of it's like meditation. I feel like I can meditate wherever,
Yep.
whenever I want to. You just drop into
Totally.
that space. Once you've been in that space, it seems like you can get there faster with smaller doses.
Exactly. And I am a fan of like, hey, of course, go big here and there. I mean, I still go big once in a while, but or go big without trying to go big like recently. But I think there's a lot to be said for these smaller doses where you don't necessarily need to just blow out your brains. There is a way to actually work with it,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're very big on setting the intention and, like developing. I mean, I have different techniques, like, like if I have a mantra that I want to use during it, or if I'm really working on one particular thing, or, clearing something, that to me, I keep saying the dose doesn't even really matter.
Hmm.
Because it will give you pretty much what you want and need, if you really work with it in a certain manner. But yeah, I prefer, I mean, and I also believe that different times of, like, this is where I get a little woo woo, but I've worked with both psilocybin and ayahuasca during, let's say, eclipses or full moons or
Mm.
certain astrological transits going on, and there's no denying that those have an effect. Again, it might be me, it might be sensitive, but I mean, I've had the craziest experiences where I'm like, oh, wow, I don't understand. I just took, whatever it was, 2 grams 2 months ago of the exact same thing. But then this time I take it and it happens to fall on this like eclipse, and it's like 10
Mm-hmm.
times stronger. How is that even possible? I don't know. It's happened to me more than once though.
I know it's incredible. I'm not sure I believe in the astrological elements of this, but I have an astrologer.
There you go.
And before my last peyote experience, I messaged her and said, "Hey, I'm going to be doing this at this time. Tell me what's going to be going on." And she explained everything. She said, "Wow, there's really this you need to look for, and you're going to have some of this." And it's very interesting.
Wow.
Yeah,
But you're not sure you believe in what she's saying?
yeah, and she knows that.
I
And
love it.
I don't know that I believe in anything. So whenever I talk to anybody about anything, I'm always like, "Yeah, I don't know if I believe it."
That's
And
good.
yeah, so she's wonderful, and I met her at an ayahuasca ceremony.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and so we're really connected. And while I may not necessarily take everything into my heart, I take whatever she says into my heart because it's coming from a good place, and I'm really glad that I have her to share this stuff with me. So it's an interesting thing. Yeah.
That's so funny. But no, the Buddha said this. Don't believe me. Go prove it to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's don't want to get political, but that's what Al Franken said. He
Oh
he would
yeah.
tell me how all the Republicans are liars back when I was one. And he would say, "Don't believe me, go look up the sources." And as soon as I started doing my own research, I was like, "Well, shit, he's right.
Oh my
They are all
gosh.
lying to me." Yeah, so go to the source. So,
Too
um,
funny.
so mantras, intention, dose maybe not mattering. What if somebody was to ask you for advice? I mean, we talked about this. This program is not about recommending people go out and do psychedelics.
Yeah.
That is not. We are not recommending that anybody out there go out and do this. This is too big of a thing for us to sit here and recommend that for you. But
Yeah.
somebody who's doing some research, what pieces of information would you want them to add to their research about what you would consider to be important elements of a good experience?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I take kind of an extreme stance compared to some people who say, well, you must only do ayahuasca with a, shaman who studied for X number of years. I don't
Right,
actually
right.
believe in that. For me, I hold, like I'm really big on knowing the background of who I work with, what their lineage is, what they have done, where they come from. I really feel highly into intuition. Like if something doesn't feel right, don't do it. I have
Mm,
trusted my friends, and I've had some bad experiences.
yeah.
So, of course, I like to say, like, go with people you trust, but also know that what works for your good friend might not work for you. Um, I always say, look, like, who am I to judge the people who are drinking ayahuasca in a loft in Brooklyn with music playing from a computer. That
Mm-hmm.
happens. It's not for me, but if that works for someone else, it's all good. I don't believe in judging that. I do believe in safety. So again, just know, you just, I mean, to me, it's about educating yourself. Like, go learn about all the contraindications. I
Mm-hmm.
personally, I would not do ayahuasca with someone that doesn't ask about my medical background or what drugs I'm on, or my experience, this and that. But I have been to many people who, they're like, oh, just come and pay us $200 and
Ugh,
show up on Saturday. I know, I'm not into it at all,
that's so
but
careless.
I think it is. But again, it's like, well, I don't know, as long as you're safe, like, you might have to learn the hard way. The one thing I've learned, I've done 5-MeO DMT, the bufo, and thankfully I was with someone I highly trusted, who I'm actually very close friends with, who holds that space very regularly and has trained for many, many, many years. But it's one of those things where I'm like, look, this is not for everybody. It can actually be very dangerous. So, this is where I say it's really important to do your own research and educate yourself and really know, like, none of this, as much as I love these medicines, nothing's a magic pill. Nothing's the bullet that's going to fix everything, like,
Yeah.
it's, I can't even tell you how many psychedelics I've done. I'm still always doing some other work on myself. It's like a daily, and this is where the word integration is very important. It's everything. It's every day. It's not just 5 hours or 8 hours or whatever it is. It's, so I also would really recommend people have other support besides just the medicine.
Yeah.
Go get a somatic therapist, or go work with an integration type coach, or like, or a life coach or a spiritual coach, whatever it is, a healer, whatever works for you, someone to talk to, someone to process it with, and someone to help you actually take what you learn from these experiences and bring them into your day to day. Because again, like, yes, it's really fun and games to go expand your mind, but what's the point if it's not really doing anything for your life or for the lives of others, then it just becomes, then you kind of wonder, is it just, recreation, which
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with recreation, of course. But again, like, if you're being shown all these changes to make, like, hey, get help making changes. So that's usually what I say for people. But almost everybody I know has had one negative experience. I
Yes.
feel like you kind of have to go through that terrible initiation of being like, I'm never doing that again, or I'm
Yeah.
never going with that person again, or I'm never trusting Beth to pour me mushroom tea at Burning Man. All my old campmates were like, sure, just make us tea. And then many, many, many grams later, they were like, holy crap.
Yeah. That's tea, mushroom tea is the only time I've ever thrown up with mushrooms.
My God, yeah.
I don't know what it was, but I have stayed away from that. But you're right. Yeah, there are bad experiences, not just like a quote bad trip, which ends up having good lessons, but there are
Yeah,
bad experiences, and I think it's really key, like you said, for people to do their research. And because, if you don't follow the rules with ayahuasca, that can kill you.
okay. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, with mushrooms, you may go through it and not have an experience at all and wonder why the heck not. But it's so important for people to understand what they're getting into and to not take this lightly.
Exactly. Especially when it's the deadly ones, the ones that you really can't combine with, you know,
Yeah.
prescriptions or whatever. That's where, to me personally, if someone offered me something like ayahuasca or bufo or MEO or any of the, DMTs, without asking about these other, the health intake, I would
Hmm.
walk away. I would just walk away, because to me that's not the kind of,
Yeah, it's irresponsible.
yeah, I think it is too. But then again, I mean, it's like,
Well, people can get lucky, but it's wonderful to get lucky, but the flip side is horrible.
exactly.
Yeah.
Not worth it. But yeah,
Not worth it.
that's the advice I would have. Yeah.
All right. That's good advice. Well, that's all fantastic stuff. So, as a wrap up, is there anything else you want to share Do you want to share some details on these coaching businesses and some services and events and stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So, I actually help a lot of people start and grow their business and a lot of people who are on the medicine path. So, I actually have a lot of clients who are looking to integrate psychedelics into their work or make psychedelics their actual business. So, I have a lot of clients who are, psychedelic integration coaches or who want to start, like coaching and adding microdosing to their coaching, whatever it is, or even just life coaching, spiritual coaching.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, I really believe that the more everybody really steps into their own heart and their own purpose and really does what they love, we will have a better planet. And to me, with the changes going on in the world and the intensities of everything, now is a great time to go and start your business, especially if you don't feel aligned, if things aren't working for you. It's like, I don't know, to me, what has this year shown us? Life is really
Yeah.
short. It's either now or never, right? Or it's like, what are you waiting for? You're waiting for the next pandemic or the pandemic to get worse? I don't know. So that's essentially what I do. But you can check out my work. I also have hosted two summits called Psychedelic Sacred Medicines and Purpose. And the other one this year was called Psychedelic Sacred Medicines, Purpose and Business. And where I interview, it's kind of like a podcast, but all at once, and just
Mm-hmm.
like 25, 30 people. And I interview all these experts around this interconnection between the growth of psychedelics and the popularity and people who are on this path or curious about it and how it actually affects what we do for a living and the business that we all, the kind of businesses we want to see and doing conscious business. And how, I mean, I even interviewed someone like David Bronner, and it's like, okay, well, someone who's running a multi-million-dollar business can actually integrate psychedelics into their business, which is exactly what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're curious about that, some of it is still available. It's just, everything's at my website, BethAWeinstein.com, psychedelicsandpurpose.com, or psychedelicsandbusiness.com. I'm also all over the internet, just at my name. So,
Good.
and I'm connected to Stuart. So, yeah. So,
Yes, and I will, and I'll put all these links on the text part of the podcast, which will end up, it always gets pushed out to all the platforms. So no matter
awesome.
what you're listening to this on, you can go to the text part and find those links.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah, outstanding. Well, anything else you want to get out there, Beth?
No, I mean that's pretty much it. I'm not sure when this podcast will be published, but I do have some free online events slash workshops that I'm hosting in January and February. One is
This will
about
be out
how.
before then.
Oh, will it? Oh, great. Okay, so
Yeah.
one is January 7th, early January. It's about how to start and grow your transformational business around coaching or healing. I'm hosting another one in late January about growing a psychedelic business. I actually recently hosted one, a different one about psychedelic business. So those are actually still available. But everybody can pretty much find this just through my website, Instagram, Facebook. I also have a bunch of free trainings that I give out if people are just curious about, okay, how do I get this started? Or how do I even figure out what it is that I want to do? Um,
Nice.
so those are all available, just website, BethAWeinstein.com. And yeah, like would love people to connect. And, I really believe that we're all in this together. Like, you, Stuart, what you're doing with this podcast, me talking, us sharing and connecting. This is the education, as we're saying early on. It's really about normalizing this and coming out of the psychedelic closet and sharing yourself so that we can actually change the stigma, move this decriminalization movement forward and actually get this medicine to people who need it, because
Yeah.
it is extremely transformational and powerful. And I do believe that, hey, there's a reason why it's growing more in popularity during these crazy times that I don't think are going to end anytime soon. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, that is fantastic, Beth. I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate all the sharing and the great information you brought here to this episode, and I'm truly grateful.
Thank you so much. It was so good to be here, and I'm really honored that you had me. And thank you so much for this work you're doing. It's so, so beautiful and so needed right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Beth. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
That concludes this edition of the Stoned Ape Reports. Thank you for listening. Please follow us on Instagram at Stoned Ape Comedy and subscribe to our newsletter at www.stonedapecomedy.com. Again, thanks for listening, and catch you next time, Stoned Apes.